I am a temple who walks the earth. My womb is fertile for giving birth. I am a woman planted in truth. I grow my branches from sacred roots. You are the form of who you wanna be. So come untethered, your soul is free. We're here to heal, we're here to thrive. We are a dream who's come alive. We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An evolution for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. 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 For God's sake.
And so it is. Hello, Essence. This is Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. So we're here today in the, I feel like I want to say aftermath of the recent full moon in Pisces, which was super intense for me and many of my friends for sure. You know, it really, that moon was in some ways merciless and fierce in her illumination of those places where there are still shadows, and she was really calling us forward into fuller and fuller integrity with ourselves, with our essence, with those places of our lives that aren't quite there. And gosh, you know, and I say merciless because, you know, my friends are on this path with me and we do some deep work. You know, we really are handling so many of these pieces of our puzzle. And then when we get shown another piece that we felt we had handled, it's like, really? Okay, great. I'm going to get to that, you know, and the moon just kept shining and blazing and, you know, smiling her stern yet loving motherly face and saying, look now, now is the time. And so it was intense for me for sure. And it may have been for you as well. And so I'm just going to share today, yes, what happened during, you know, the moon phase, and also, of course, the bigger story that, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking, gosh, I've talked about ending relationships a couple different times on this show. So there's the episode, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Which is more about love relationships. And then I did a show one day about ending relationships, you know, like friend relationships as we evolve on the path. And here I am talking about another ending of a relationship. So, you know, on the one hand, I guess take it with a grain of salt. Maybe I'm just a relationship ender. And also I feel like there's medicine, you know, there's medicine. So as always, sit with this in your own power around it and walk the path that, you know, that serves the highest evolution of your own soul. Your path does not have to be my path. And I'm certainly doing the best I can over here on mine. So I want to start with what really transpired. There's kind of two phases of this conversation for me. There's the original piece that catalyzed the whole thing, which has nothing to do with my family of origin. And then there's the family of origin piece. So, of course, there's some connection between the two of them. And actually, I feel like the connection is liberation and emancipation and sovereignty and being a stand for truth. And what happened that kicked it all off was my beautiful 11-year-old 6th grade daughter came home from public school. She's only been in public school a couple weeks. And she came home and said, hey, we watched this video in science class today, and the video was this guy, and he was really making fun of every kind of energy thing. And he said he had this crystal ball, and he was making fun of psychics and saying how obviously that isn't true. And then they did a segment on spoon bending, and it was like a Saturday Night Live skit where they were joking about how stupid it would be to be able to bend a fork, right? And then astrology, how astrology is such a crock. And and she said it with this sort of uncertainty in her space, and what I could feel was the way that it had temporarily unseated her in her own knowing of who she is, which is a highly intuitive, very sensitive empath. And of course, she is steeped in this home where her mother is, me. And, so at first I tried to brush it off, and I just said, oh, did you tell him your mom's a pretty good psychic and she's willing to come and give a talk at school about how things really work? And she kind of laughed nervously, and she goes, of course not. Of course I'm not going to say that. That would be so embarrassing. She goes, I just didn't say anything. But she said, but I do think, that I don't know if astrology is actually true. And it's just funny because astrology is the one thing that I follow astrology, but always as an after fact. So I don't use it to navigate my life, but when I notice something happening in my life, I will refer to it to confirm what's happening, right? And so she hasn't had direct experience with that. And what I noticed is how she was looking for a way to align with this new school that she really wants to be in, and to find a way to be both herself and part of the sheep, and also really finding her own footing in this space of what do I know? What do I know? What is it safe to know? How can I know what I know? And so, I sat with it, and I was a little pissed, and because what I saw is just what is even the label for it? It's in my system, it's the ridiculousness of this masculine paradigm, right? So she has a male teacher. It was a male in the video. She has a male principal. And, the nerve of them to show something that completely dishonors all ways of feminine knowing. It dishonors mystery and magic and non-linear ways, and, which in my opinion are actually much more advanced. As I see science, I love science, and I love that, it's starting to catch up to what we already know. But I find it interesting lately. I've watched these studies come out that prove that there's actually some mysterious lineage link in cells. And so, people who are descendants of people who were in the Holocaust have this similar trauma gene in their brains and in their bodies, even though they didn't actually experience it, right? And that's brand new breaking news. And, in energy healing, we've been doing that work for eons. And so, I get that. And I also get that we're, in a public school in the Bible Belt, and, you can only really expect so much. And we've chosen to be here and to stay here. And so it opens this conversation for us, right? And we handled it the way that we do, which is, I think, really beautifully. We opened the inquiry around it, and I shared with my daughter what I'm sharing with you. And, and we had these beautiful conversations around, she said, Mom, I just don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know if I believe everything that you say. And I also don't believe what they say at school. And how will I know? How will I know? And I said, sweetheart, the only way you can really know anything is to have your own experience with it. And I never try to tell you what to believe. I encourage you to have your own experience. And actually, part of what makes me so mad that they would show that video at school is because it's really the anti-education. It's the antithesis of evolution, is closing the book on inquiry, believing that we have a right answer and that everything outside of that answer is false. It's exactly like when people thought the world was flat, and those people who were convinced that was the case didn't need to take a boat to the edge of it because they knew you would just fall off. And so, for all of the centuries, that was the prevailing wisdom. That's what happened. And if not for those brave pioneers who say, is that so? And is that the way it has to be? And let me just challenge that. Let me push the edge a little bit. Let me walk over a threshold that has not been crossed before. And let's just see what we see. They weren't like, we for sure know there's something different. They weren't like, you have to believe that this is the way. It was just like, let's go explore and discover. And that is where knowledge and evolution comes from. And I know in a way that as I say these things, I'm preaching to the choir, right? Because if you're listening to the show, you are an evolutionary. And, there's this thing that I've been involved with, which is inquiring even about that, right? Because I have this family that is so close-minded and so Christian and so right-wing. And, so it's forced me to really look at the dichotomy there of, is my open-mindedness really just a form of closed-mindedness, right? That my refusal to close my mind is also somehow closed-minded. It's really a Zen cone. And this is my high integrity, where I'm committed to discovering the truth and to continue to dig and dig until we get to a place where, there's something immutable that feels real. And so that's where the conversation began. And I was watching some news shows over the weekend, which I rarely do. And it was like the moon kept pointing my eyes to these places where the angry, hateful voices have the floor. That Donald Trump is leading the polls, and it's because he is so close-minded and because he's unwilling to apologize and because he is a bully, that he keeps getting followed and covered. And, and I was really disturbed to hear that some people had beaten up I can't remember if it was a transgendered person or an immigrant, but it was a minority of some type. I think it was an immigrant, actually, because after they really beat this person badly, they said, yeah, Donald Trump was right. And it was a Rolling Stone article about how dangerous this rhetoric actually can be, because it emboldens these voices that are so close-minded and so, it's funny to me, the voices have always seemed loud, but actually they're muting the hatred that's really inside them. And so as I'm watching, I was just getting more and more depressed about, how is this happening and why does it continue to happen? And how come those of us who are enlightened, I wouldn't even say enlightened, those of us who are seeking enlightenment, those of us who are conscious, those of us who subscribe to love and light, how come we aren't doing anything? How come we're not saying anything? And, and I was just present to the ages and ages where we've been burned at the stake, even though our numbers were such that we didn't have to allow that to happen. And yet we did, we did. And, in the Holocaust, the same way, right? Like the Jewish people had the numbers. They could have prevented that, but they kept turning the other cheek and doing the more humble approach and assuming the best would happen. And the hate-filled voices won. They won. And so it was just like the moon was showing me one thing after another. And I was just getting more and more despair about when is enough, right? So this is all happening behind the scenes. And Friday night, I had posted on Facebook just this little story about my daughter. And for me, it was actually more a post about the divine feminine and us reclaiming our right to have mystery and magic be part of the discussion. You know, in my opinion, it ought to be the entire discussion, and then science kind of falls somewhere within that framework, and that is where we're heading. But, you know, that's really what I shared. And so then I went off to, you know, bask in the moon's vivid slideshow of humanity and evolution. And when I came back to my phone, there were these posts. So the first post was from my mother, who had posted, you know, something along the lines of like, my heart breaks for the fact that poor Olivia has never learned the real truth, the way of Jesus Christ, or something, you know. And, you know, here's the funny thing about families is there's the words and then there's the energetic daggers that come with the words, right? So, of course, I'm filled up with the daggers and I'm like, oh, shit, okay, here we go, right? Despite the fact that I've emailed my mom, you know, many times and asked her not to post her political and religious beliefs on my Facebook post and not to send me emails trying to convert me. And like really over these last 10 years that I've been on this path, I am always the one who offends them. And then I come with the olive branch and I say, you know, where can we find some common ground here? And let's agree to disagree. And we literally meet them where they are. We go to almost all family events in the hometown where my family lives, where my brother and sister and their families live, where my mother-in-law lives. And that town, incidentally, was just rated the fourth most redneck town in Ohio, right? I think Viv's going to post a link to that if you want to see where I came from. The picture that goes with the article is a bar that I was in as a teenager. And that's over on the chat page, which is www.wsmrchat.com if you want to see. It's rated on things like most guns per capita and most bars and most churches and things like that. So literally this is the place that when there's a family event, we go there and we find ourselves in my nephew's birthday party, which is held in the church, and he's standing under the cross as he receives his shotgun for his, 14th birthday or whatever. Right. And we've humored them over all these years. We've humored them. And I would say in a very compassionate way, not in a, we're here and you guys are so cute, but literally in a like, we're going to love you where you are. And even with all the hatred and bigotry and racism and, and all of that, we're still going to be here. And the cosmic joke of all of that is that they can, they feel like they're barely tolerating us, right? So it's been tense for sure. And what's interesting is I've said this before, but I actually grew up in a very loving family. We were very tight knit. We did everything together. My siblings and I played with each other. We lived in the country. My family's farmed, and my sister was my best friend, all the way through college and into, when we had our children and got married. So this is not like a troubled family from the beginning. Like we really were tight knit, which is one of the, I think, the gifts of this experience for me is that it would have been easier to cast them aside much earlier if they had been abusive in some way or if they were, different, but I really love them. And growing up, I was my mom's favorite and she was my favorite, and I couldn't imagine we would ever not be in relationship. So my mom posts, and then my brother likes her post, and then my mother-in-law likes her post, and then my sister likes her post. So literally every single one of our extended family is now on the dagger train. And then my sister begins this discourse with a beautiful soul that I am friends with on my Facebook page. And I can't remember her name off the bat, but she held such grace. She's an angelic shamanic practitioner and was really trying to entertain an intelligent discussion about, it kind of turned towards, so of course my family took this whole post about, it's blasphemous because it's truth with the capital T, and it's, and that, of course, the only truth with the capital T is Jesus' truth from the Bible in the pews at the First Baptist Church in Canton, Ohio. And so this rant ended up going back and forth, and it was very venomous on my sister's side and just like ridiculous, right? So that's all happening. And so I'm just baking in I'm not actually even following it on Facebook that much, but I'm just baking in what is to be done. What is to be done? It's like the moon was bringing all of this forward. Like, you can't actually keep ignoring this. You can't keep showing up in the midst of this hatred and bigotry and not be who you are, right? You're who you are every other place in your life. Literally every other place. There's no place I would compromise who I am except for there. And so I just paused. Like, I didn't intervene on the Facebook conversation. I didn't respond back to them. I just went inward and into the crunchiness and the intensity and, really what does need to happen here. And it culminated actually in me coming out with realizing that I've been deeply in a new initiation around light and love and coming out of the shadows more completely in my work, in my life, in my soul. And one of the lessons that had been delivered to me was this concept of who are you inviting to your party and why, right? And that's on a cosmic soul level. So from energies, opportunistic energies that you might be subconsciously inviting to your party, to, who you're hanging around with, to, even the clients, right? So I started to reflect on, oh yeah, it's interesting. Like, as I've filled classes in the past, it's been based on who can I help rather than, or who needs my work, or who would be better off if they had my work. And what I'm being initiated into is that actually I only need to be inviting people to my party who love and support me. And that includes clients, right? This is a new octave of energetic exchange. So it's not about what I can do for them, because the work that I do is good for anyone. But working with just anyone is not exactly what's good for my soul, right? And this message, I can see so many of you popping forward like, yes, this is for you and you and you and you, right? When we're working beneath our pay grade, when we're trying to save people who can't actually exchange with us or pay us or get their lives together long enough to make a rent payment, those are not the people who are going to serve you in the delivery of your soul, right? When we stay in relationship with family members who, who really aren't capable of even seeing that how they're, quote, loving you with their projections and their conversions and their daggers is not actually love. They don't even have a language that's not love. It's actually control. It's actually their own fear. It's actually their own disconnect from their own sovereignty and freedom that has them have to persecute those of us who aren't sheep anymore. When there's not even a beginning to that conversation, it's like I could love them all day long and that would be good for them, but it's not actually good for me, And so this is where it gets tricky because, I am a firm believer in taking your medicine. And we've just talked last week, right? I love the universe presenting the flip sides of the coin. So we just talked last week about using your projections about someone to understand, like, where is their clearing in me and where is their judgment in me? And so I've done that for 10 years, deeply, weekly, daily sometimes, where it's like, okay, so let me see, where is it in me that's afraid to be in essence? And where is this thing a reflection of a fear in me about being in essence? And it's really the fires of that conversation, that crucible has formed me into who I am, And I'm very grateful. It is why my, alien egg was delivered to that redneck town in the middle of the heart of nowhere, literally, right? And so I get all of that, and there are no mistakes, and only gifts and teachers, right? I do believe that. And what I started to notice is that after taking that medicine for 10 years, those interactions used to bring me more into essence, right? So in the moment, there would be an egoic contraction, and then I would go manage it. And then I would come back and I would be more essence, like, okay, that's not me. This is me. This is me not in reaction to that really strong, reaction provoking piece. And so, yeah, firmer. And then what has begun to happen is that those interactions actually pull me more into ego, right? Because they're becoming more forceful. They really are intensifying along with, the rhetoric that's happening with the political race. And what I typically, I don't even look at the things that they post. And it's like, I know their views, but I hadn't wanted to see them because in my mind, I'm always saying, but they're good people and we just believe different things. And you know what this cycle forced me to do is to take a really honest look at, are they good people? What makes somebody a good person? If their full-time job is hatred and bigotry and persecution, how is that a good person, right? And how is that somebody that you ought to be associating with and continuously looking the other way, So that actually pulled me further into something has to be done here. And, and I really sat with it because I thought, well, on the one hand, it's just some Facebook posts and I could unfriend them on Facebook and call it a day, and then there was but they're really showing themselves here. They're showing themselves. And, if I'm pissed at the school for unseating my daughter with their devaluing of who she is and who I am, then why would I allow that from her grandmothers? Why would I allow that from her aunt, her uncle, her cousins, And the mama bear came forward in me, not only the mama bear for my daughter, but the mama bear for us as divine feminine beings, right? At some point, we have to stand the fuck up and we have to say, we are not going to burn on your stakes any longer. We're not going to apologize for who we are. We're not going to minimize what we see and what we know and who we are. We're done. We're done with that, haters. And I think, we'll have to be treading lightly here because it's certainly easy to go into ego realms with this, and it's easy to go into embattling ourselves, which is certainly not the path we want to go down again. And yet I feel that we are standing here on a threshold of something new emerging. I actually feel like there is some strife that will be coming forward through this political road ahead. And it's going to take some voices coming to the forefront to say, nope, we're not going down that road, right? And it's not about you can hate all you want. I'm just going to be over here loving. It's like at a certain point, we have to set some boundaries. And for me, as I started to look at setting the boundaries, what I had to feel into was, because I'm present to here I am initiating into this brand new space of love and light. And honestly, I've had to learn to speak the language of love again, because I'm really good at loving other people, my clients and things like that. But actually feeling love and receiving love and having a home for it in myself. And so that part feels really tender to me. So of course it was met by this really aggressive interaction with people, who ought to be loving me. And that's also why I gave it quite a pause, because I was feeling like, maybe this is my warrior conjuring something up so that I have something to fight against rather than just be in love, and my higher self just said, no, babe, no, it's time to separate from this. And so what I had been seeing was oh yeah, I'm moving into love. And so the moon is showing me these places where there's still fear energies in my life. And it's my family, right? They literally are like made of fear and don't do anything that's not in fear. And, but it wasn't quite right. And then I kept thinking like, yeah, but then it feels a little like, I don't know, there's something else. And what I came to was that actually what the moon wanted to show me was places where I would stay attached out of fear, right? Places where I would stay in relationship because I was afraid of something else. And it was curious because at first I was like, well, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to be myself. I'm not afraid to, I could step out of relationship with them. So I really had to dig because it's not like I don't even talk to them a lot. I only see them every couple months and it's only for a brief time. So I could let that go. So as I met even deeper with my soul, what I discovered is my attachment was that I was using the fear, the shame and the guilt that they hurl at me continuously for 10 years. I was using that because I didn't trust myself to be free of it, right? This is a collective issue, sisters. This is not just me and my family. There's a reason why the loud, angry voices are getting louder. It's not because we need to go into hiding. It's because we need to get real about where are we still afraid. Not afraid to get burned at the stake. Yes to that. And yes, that can be cleared. And we've been doing that work, right? But the next piece is, are we afraid to be free? Can we trust ourselves with the power of having a voice that is heard? Can we trust ourselves to be emancipated, right? It is that slave mentality, right? Where they would set the slaves free and the slaves would stay. They would stay on the plantation because they didn't know anything else, right? So they were still slaves even though they were free. That's what's happening with us now. It's what's happening with us as divine feminine, right? Where, here in the Western world particularly, we're more free than we've ever been. We have access to resources. We have, access to education. We have social media where we can connect and align as a collective and a consciousness. And yet here we are floundering with getting our resources together and having enough money to pay our bills and, being in relationships that hinder us and slow our evolution. Why are we doing that? We're doing that because it has been so ingrained in us that we cannot be trusted, right? That us Jezebels who are out there challenging the status quo and believing in the mystery and creating a crack in the armor of the belief of what is, that we cannot be trusted with our freedom. We will upend the whole system. We certainly will. And so from that space, I handled it. I handled my attachments and I said, yeah, I trust myself to be free. I no longer need shame and guilt as a limitation. I don't need that to protect myself from myself. I know that love is now the guide, right? And those who love and support me are who I trust to hold me in my evolution. Like I had tearful conversations with Lance and Viv and, many of my other guides and supporters just saying, can I trust myself? Really, because integrity is one of my highest directives this lifetime. Can I trust myself to not get too out there, to not get too militant or crazy or woo-woo or I don't know what, all of the bullshit. And, and what I discovered through those inquiries is, now my system is ready to be held by those who love and support me. And those who are in my space for some other reason are uninvited. They are now uninvited. And so I wrote a long email to my family, letting them all know that, and explaining, where we are and what has occurred. And I just, I really wanted to leave myself room for evolution, because I know how quickly I evolve, and I know how sometimes the lights are just not on and then they come on and you're like, oh yes, that's the way, that's the way I should have handled it, or that's the way that brings it into alignment. And what I was clear on is that this action needs taken right now. And what I need to create for myself is a cocoon, where it is really loving and beautiful. And as I'm nurturing this love and light in myself, that I surround myself with people who want that for me, and are capable of holding a true, integrous space of really just championing my return. And so what I said to my family is, we are going out of communication with you through at least the end of this year, and no commitments on what would happen after that. But, that way I didn't have to deal with, are we going to get together for holidays? And listen, this was not easy. My son's birthday is this weekend, and my family still gets together for every one of the children's birthdays, right? And so I also then had to have the conversation with my son, like, hey, how do you feel about us not having a birthday party with your relatives? And, so this has been a big deal. It's been a big deal for all of us. And the night that we decided we were doing this, I ended up laying out on my in my temple with my beautiful daughter, and just explaining to her what is happening and where we're going with it, and letting her know before I sent the email that was my intention. And she cried, she cried and cried, and I was prepared for her to be angry at me, because she really loves her cousins, and I was prepared for her to say, why are you doing this, And she didn't. She cried for the disappointment and the impossibility of opening a mind that is super glued shut. She said, why do they have to be so crazy? Why can't they just be nice? Why do they have to hate me? Why do they hate us? Because she's been raised in a home where everything is game, and there's no reason to label something as right and wrong. And to have these people who ought to love her showing up in this really immovable way, where they're just convinced that her soul is in trouble, and her experience of her own soul is that it is fine. Not only fine, but actually filled with light, right? And she is us, sisters. She is us. And when we let the volume get so loud from the haters, from the people who would have us believe that we are invalid, at some point we have to stop letting our foundation get shaken. We have to be firm enough in our essence and in our relationship with our higher selves to say, no, that's you, that's not me. I trust myself, right? I know who I am. And I'm bringing what I'm bringing because that's what I'm made to do. You can wallow in your bullshit all you want. It's not for me. So that's where we stand. I sent the email. I, blocked the Facebook posts. All of those actions have been taken. And, and I want to say, I was mixed about doing the show, only because I felt like, God, it sounds like a lot of drama, and really I'm not in drama. But also I'm committed to feeling the fullness of all that's here. And so I've been really giving careful airtime internally to all that's moving through. And so I want to say the painful parts that are moving through are largely my inner little girl, who really wishes her family could love her. She really would love to just be adored by the people that she's genetically connected to. And, it comes and goes, because in a way she's really excited to play with her soul family. And, these beautiful people that are coming forward to love and support her, like every one of those strokes just has her purring like a kitten. And also, there are parts of me where my heart breaks for my children, that they aren't in a lineage that will, just a family lineage that will bring them, wisdom and joy and shepherd their becoming. And, as I say that, like, I get that we're going to be doing that for them, but there's grief, there's grief that it isn't different. And also, like, there's actually, it's weird. It's almost like grief and joy together, like it's one of my favorite spaces in ceremony, that place where, like, the cosmic joke of it all is this giant love, which is also so filled with grief, and it's all the same thing, So every time one of my beautiful soul family shows up to love me, I feel grief and joy, Yeah, I don't know if I can say it better than that. It's not regret, it's not like I want to be with them and I can't. It's not like I'm longing for them to change, because I'm pretty sure they're not going to change, my family. So there's that. And that feels important. It actually feels like some energetic tending that needs to happen as I complete my emancipation process. And when I feel into emancipation, it's funny, the definition of emancipation is the fact or process of being set free. The fact or process of being set free from legal, social, or political restrictions, and I would say, or energetic restrictions, liberation. And it's also the freeing of someone from slavery, right? And so, what I'm shedding are these layers that I have been a willing slave, a willing participant in my own enslavement, right? I chose them as my family so that they, would be this medicine for me, and I participated in it all these years. And that was perfect. And also, I just reached out and took the keys off the wall and opened my cell door. Literally. And I'm opening the cell doors inside my system to say, okay, all of that old programming that would have me stay attached in any other ways at the deepest levels, I allow that to be gone. And you may be able to just do that for yourself without divorcing your family. That's perfectly possible. And what I get is that there's something important about this evolutionary step, even if your family is not as crazy as mine. But there's something important about growing ourselves up, about fully emancipating ourselves so that we no longer use our parents or our siblings or our hometown or our church to hold us back from being the truth with a capital T that we really are. And so that's the work that we're being invited into. It's the portal the moon opened for us. It's, it is this next phase, and it's going to require us to start to speak more fiery truths than we have in the past. It's going to require us to lean into each other and to hold ourselves in the inquiry of what is the course of right action here, and what is most energetically in alignment, and how do we be a stand for ourselves rather than a stand against hatred and bigotry and closed-mindedness, right? We're working razor's edge refinements here, and you are being called to begin the work with what is right in front of you. It doesn't take radical outward steps. That happens to be my version of it. And my sense is that for you, it might be small victories. It might be little courageous acts of authenticity and beingness. Really, right? Of beingness. That's the most radical thing we can bring to this party. Because I looked at the energy of it over the weekend, like, well, what is the way? They're not going to stop being hateful. They're not going to stop arming themselves and buying guns and looking for who needs to be shot or protected against, right? With quotes around that. they're not going to stop doing that no matter what I say. And really, the conversations are so disparate, right? There's not even a beginning. Like, we're still somewhat in relationship with my mother-in-law, and, I want to be open to her questions, but they're literally so pedestrian. It's either you're this kind of Christian who goes to my same church and reads my same Bible, or you're nothing, right? You must be agnostic or atheist. There is no transcending any of that into spirituality. And so I was like, well, damn, how do we start then? How can we come into oneness? And what I see is it's not about anybody converting anybody. It's about us really emancipating ourselves into the sovereignty of beingness and shining the bright light of that such that it becomes a beacon, right? And then evolution will happen and things will occur. And it's like there's those people on the one side, there's us people on the other side, and then there's this buffer zone in the middle of people who are not yet awake but could become awake, right? And it's like, whose light is going to shine brighter? Is it going to be the darkness with their loud voices and their pointed guns and their righteousness? Or is it going to be those of us standing in sovereignty and light and saying, we only invite people who love and support us? Our medicine is good for everyone. It would cure the whole shadow, right? And yet, as light beings, we have to be discerning about who we're opening our doors to, and we have to be meticulous in tending our own light. That is the work that's here to be done, right? And so by way of giving, equal airtime to what's moving through me, there's the parts that feel really tender, and then there's the parts that feel like, I want to say, let me just find the right words. Yeah, there's the parts of me that feel wildly, ecstatically free and clear. And, for months, I've been working this issue in my energetic of this kind of low level of shame that runs through my system. And it's kind of a feeling of like, I'm going to get caught, or I'm going to get found out, or I'm going to get in trouble. And I've searched and searched, and I've cleared some things around it. But it was just like kind of underlying everything. And, as a warrior, that's part of the gig. So I was like, well, I get it. And also I'd like to be done with it. So what needs to happen here? And I totally did not get it until I cut the cord with them. But the minute I did that, it was like a radio that had been on low volume in the background turned off. And suddenly there was no more shame in my system. There was no, even on these radio shows, like as I'd be saying stuff, I'd be having this feeling like, are they going to hear this? Is there going to be a repercussion, right? That's our little girl, right? It's our little girl. It's past life stuff. It's using them to mitigate, my freedom. And I don't feel any of it, not a drop. There is no shame at all in me and what I am saying to you today. I'm not worried I'm going to get in trouble. I don't care who's listening. This is truth with a capital T. And so that is running through my system, and it feels beautiful, beautiful. And the other beautiful thing running through my system is miraculous love and support. So my children, who are always my first concern in making sure that, I wanted to be careful that I wasn't getting into a pissing match with their family and then that was going to hurt them. We've really rallied into a solidness around, this is our belief system. And actually, it's been freeing for all of us because, as much as they love their cousins, every time they would go stay there, it would be, we would really have to sink and hide ourselves and, let all of the barbs and the jabs about who we are and what we do and people like us, go by in order to stay in relationship. And there's a freedom in my children's system where really, they're not attached, like they want to see their cousins and also they're glad to be free from it. And so that's beautiful. And And then the most amazing things are happening. So literally the morning after I sent the email, I woke up. I hadn't slept much that night. I was noticing the shifting in my energy field of like not having the shame. And then also a little bit of unmooring, like, am I okay? And am I alone in the universe? And who's got my back? You know, like I had kind of those things happening. So I didn't sleep well. And I woke up in the morning and I checked my my messages, and I had a message from a dear, dear sister, a temple sister, and I haven't spoken to her in months. And literally, her message said, "It is my pleasure to introduce members of my soul family to each other. You all should know one another." Right? She literally uses the word soul family the morning after I free myself from my biological family. And of course, the people she introduces me to are exactly the souls that I have been waiting to meet. Like, they're from my home. We are from the same star system. We do similar work, except for they're like big brother and sister. So I literally got rid of my actual big sister, which, you know, as I said, she was my best friend for most of my life. And she really held a place, you know, like a subconscious place in my energy system. Like somehow, you know, she's protecting me or she's doing something for me, which she did so many times over the years. And what I just felt in meeting these new soul friends is these are my real family. Like these are my soul family. They transcend this time and space reality. And one of them, you know, actually literally had a sound transmission for me that opened portals and portals and portals. It was a total miracle. So, you know, that happened. And then my other soul friend texted me yesterday, and I spent the morning on the phone with her. And Olivia and I, you know, talked about, well, who would we want to be our soul family? Now that we can choose our family, who does that look like? And you know, she was choosing our dear friend and saying like, I want her to be my aunt, and Viv can be I really want Viv to be my aunt for sure. And this woman and this woman. And, you know, and it feels like us. It feels like us. It's pretty wild. So that's running through my system as well. And, you know, what I think about that is, you know, as we put this in the larger context, it always feels the most scary before we do the thing, you know, before we let go of the fear, attachment, whatever it is. And so there's this belief like, if I do this, it will end the world. It will create Armageddon. And in some ways it does. And in some ways, it really wipes the slate clean for the miracles to begin to bloom, right? So I guess, you know, from here, we must tend our own lives. We must tend our relationships and tend our essence and tend our light and look for those micro courageous acts that we can do to further our cause and to stay in integrity with no longer compromising that which does not require it. Right? And you can sit with that. Is there any place that your essence requires a compromise? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So this is where I am. And, you know, as always, I reserve the right to be wrong. So I realize that I might open to more love, or I might find a way to accept my family as they are, or I might... or they might shift, you know, a miracle might occur and we might find a way back to each other. And I'm not attached. I'm not attached. In the meantime, I am an emancipated, sovereign being, blazing the trail that is mine to blaze. And I'm glad that you're here with me. So sisters, thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts, either over on the chat page, wsmrchat.com, or in the tribe. If you're not yet in the tribe, it's facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe. I love you, and I look forward to our next time together. Until then, so much love.
We light a candle our hearts awake. Illumination, for God's sake. A revelation, for God's sake. An inspiration, for God's sake. Illumination, for God's sake. For God's sake. For God's sake.